the Republican Party was going to join with this Tea Party movement and defeat the Obama administration and the Democrats. And Matthews wasn't prepared for his response, which was, look, this movement transcends Republican and Democrat and is about something much larger and much more important. And Matthews not wanting to, or wanting to keep this media-generated false paradigm of Republican and Democrat, obviously didn't want to hear that response, which is why he was speechless. I'm not buying it anymore with these people in Washington, D.C. Republicans, Democrats, in my opinion, they're all frankly controlled by the same money interests if they're in positions of authority on special appropriations committees and so forth. These people are no longer working for our best interest. So when we follow this coming election in November, it's important to look at the message that these people are disseminating, because some of the tougher issues, I'm not hearing any of these politicians talk about it on either side of the aisle, I think with the exception of Ron Paul, which essentially will bring me to monetary policy. This story probably is best told by starting with Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson spent his entire presidency fighting to eliminate what was the Federal Reserve Bank of his time. He was ultimately successful. He endured both an assassination attempt as well as being censured by Congress for his efforts. Nonetheless, Jackson was successful. He ended the Federal Reserve Bank of his time, his central bank. He was the only president of the United States to essentially pay off the national debt. And he did what he promised to do, was essentially, in his own words, I killed the bank. Folks, according to Andrew Jackson, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and many others, frankly, we do not have to have a national debt. It's not, it wasn't envisioned as even authorized by the Constitution. In fact, under the original Founding Fathers concept, it was unconstitutional to have a national debt. We don't need to borrow money from a private central bank, the Federal Reserve. This is money that these people print from thin air and then loan it to us at interest, holding all of us in an unconstitutional system of debt and credit. It's nothing more than a form of economic slavery. And frankly, if we don't have a national debt, we don't have to have a federal income tax, because if you understand where your federal income tax is going, which is to pay off this loan from this private central bank, eliminating the debt and eliminating this practice of borrowing money that is printed from thin air from this small group of people, we won't have the need for a a federal income tax. Thomas Jefferson said in a letter to the Secretary of Treasury, Albert Gatlin, in 1802, this is an exact quote, "If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issuance of their currencies, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their prosperity until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered." Isn't that what's happening today? I mean, look at the foreclosure rates in the United States right now. Look at what's happening with people being removed from their homes. We're having our savings confiscated through this practice of borrowing money from this Federal Reserve Bank, because if you understand how it works, you understand that inflation is actually the largest tax that's killing us right now. Income tax is number 2. Our pensions, some of our pensions are soon going to be looked to by these politicians to cover this massive debt cycle that has spiraled out of control. And we are slowly and incrementally being made dependent on government assistance. And we are more and more looking to the government to take care of us. And this change in mindset from individual responsibility and individual accountability to a mindset of, well, I'm not going to worry about it, the government is going to take care of it, or the government is going to take care of me. They're not. And you have to only look to Katrina and some of the other great examples of fine federal government response. This concept empowers the federal government when we ought to be right now beating this animal back into a corner. As children, we were taught that the American colonists revolted against England because of taxation without representation. Folks, this isn't true. This isn't true. The real reason for the Revolutionary War has over time been concealed from us. It's been hidden from successive generations of Americans. Our children are no longer taught the truth, and thus we are uneducated and cannot be free. According to Benjamin Franklin's writings and others from the time, the prime reason for the Revolutionary War was King George III's refusal to allow the colonists to continue to print their own money without costs to them. In 1764, Benjamin Franklin was summoned to England and asked to provide an explanation as to why the colonies were so prosperous and flourishing, frankly, beyond everyone's expectations. In stark contrast, when Franklin arrived in England in 1764, there was rampant unemployment, poverty among the middle class, food lines, and poorhouses. And Franklin was then asked, well, why are the colonies so prosperous? And Franklin replies to King George III, and this is an exact quote, "That is simple. In the colonies, we issue our own money. It's called colonial script. We issue it in proper proportion to the demands of trade and industry to make products pass easily from the producers to the consumers. In this manner of creating for ourselves our own paper money, we control its purchasing power, and we have no interest to pay no one." The prosperity that the colonies exhibited during the time they were issuing their own currency without cost and without the requirement to repay it back, that prosperity, however, wasn't long-lived, because the same year that Benjamin Franklin explained to England how it was working, the Bank of England successfully pushed for the passage of the Currency Act, which made it illegal for the colonies to issue their own colonial script. Within 1 year of that passage of the Currency Act, Franklin writes about what he saw, and this is what he says. "The conditions were so reversed that the era of prosperity ended and a depression set in, to such an extent that the streets of the colonies were filled with unemployment." Folks, it's about who controls our nation's printing press. The printing press that prints our money. Do we, the people, control it, allowing us to issue our own currency without cost and without the requirement to repay it back? Or do a small group of unelected billionaires, the owners of the Federal Reserve, control it? And right now, since 1913, it's been the latter. And they are printing money from thin air and loaning it to us at interest. This is the real issue. So ask yourself, what politicians are talking about this? I only know of one, Ron Paul. But I haven't heard anybody else. And so all of this nonsense that you hear on TV about capping spending, reining in spending, constitutional amendments to require balanced budgets, all of this is nonsense. It isn't going to work so long as you borrow money from a private central bank. It's smoke and mirrors, folks, designed to trick you and to conceal from you the true problem with the system, which is a middleman in our currency creating process who's doing it for a piece of the action. That is the problem. Spending cuts, reining in spending, you can do all of that all day long. It isn't going to solve the fundamental problem. It's putting a Band-Aid on a cancer patient. It's not going to work. So when you're looking at politicians, to elect in November, if they're not talking about the Fed and the fraud that is this monetary system, nothing's going to change. I'd like to close with a quote from Henry Ford, because he pretty much sums this up. Before he died, Henry Ford said, "It's well enough that the people of the nation do not understand our banking or monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." Rest assured, the money interests that are controlling the Federal Reserve and issuing your currency for you are working overtime to prevent us from understanding this fraud. And it's up to each and every one of us to ensure that they fail. Thank you.